Right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Glaziers Hall. What a beautiful building on a grotty day. Thank you so much for turning out in such numbers. We filled the room. If you can squeeze up at all, please do, so we can make room for any late arrivals. So welcome to the 2024 BSI Standards Conference and AGM. It's a great pleasure to see you all. This event, for those of you who've been before will know, works best as a conversation. It's really about interactivity. We want to hear from you and learn from you about your experiences. So we have in the room a whole host of our expert standards makers, lots of organizations who are using standards, and we really want to talk to you today about your experiences and seeing what we can learn. So I'm going to talk about Mentimeter shortly, which is our website, that helps you to communicate with us, and we'll be checking in on that from time to time. Let me just do the important but boring stuff. Outside of the toilets and the cloakrooms, you'll have seen them. Upstairs, you might have been already, which is the knowledge marketplace, where you'll find refreshments at various points in the day, and it's where lunch is, and it's where the networking event will be today. Should there be a fire alarm, follow the fire exit signs, all of which are fully compliant with the relevant British standards. And we'll be meeting at the Cathedral Square, which is next to Southwark Cathedral, in the rain, I'm afraid. But let me talk about the plan for today and the exciting program that we have for you today. So first of all, let me talk about Mentimeter. So Mentimeter, hopefully you've all logged on already, but if you haven't, then please follow the QR code, which you're probably going to see on the screen at any moment. Maybe. From that, it will link you to a website where you log in once. You don't have to log in. Actually, you can go straight in, following that QR code, and there you can interact with various different questions that will be put to you through the day. So we look forward to getting your feedback, and we will be sure to share those with you and taking some of the learnings from what you tell us. Please do also check out the exhibitors marketplace, the knowledge marketplace, which is upstairs where the teas and coffees are. These are hand-picked exhibitors, people from partner organizations who we think there's a good synergy with the work that you do with us on British standards. So please do talk to those. And if you have any questions at all, please speak to any of my BSI colleagues. So you'll see with the black bit at the bottom of the lanyard, they're the BSI team, and none of them are on holiday today, so they're all here to work. So please do take their time and talk to them about any issues you might have about BSI and our work. So today's conference is celebrating the impact of standards. So this afternoon we will be paying tribute to those people who have gone above and beyond with the development and implementation of standards with our 2024 Standards Awards. And I know that some of the stories that you hear are really inspirational about the way standards are having an impact in organizations of all sizes and all sorts in all sectors. So please do join us this afternoon for that. This morning we will have an opening panel discussion where we'll be exploring organizational impact of standards, so standards that are being written and developed in order to support a fair society in a more sustainable world. Let's talk about the operational impacts of those, and we've got an excellent panel waiting to talk to us. After that, we will go into the BSI annual general meeting, so I will give more joining instructions for that later, but that's at 12 o'clock back in this room. This afternoon, we have a panel exploring ethical supply chains, so a topic that's important, I think, for everyone. We'll be looking at the way standards impact on ethical supply chains and the work that organizations are doing to deliver that. And I'm very pleased to confirm that this afternoon we will be joined by a Minister of State, so Mims Davis, MP, Minister of State for Disabled People, Health and Work. She'll be joining us this afternoon to make a keynote address. Hopefully there's no votes in Parliament that she has to disappear to. She has sent us a video just in case, but we're hoping that she'll be here in person and we can hear from her about how standards are having an impact and how governments are using them. So hopefully you're all on Mentimeter already. There's the code, and that's the QR code, and you can ask some questions and you can make some comments on that. So to begin, let's talk about impact. And I'd like to welcome up on the stage Neil Musk. Neil is the president of BSI Knowledge Solutions. Neil, welcome.
Great to see you, David. Thank you.
Welcome to Glaziers Hall. What a place.
What an amazing venue. And thank you so much to everyone for making it here today, especially in the pouring rain. So really appreciate it.
So let's talk about impact. Why is BSI focusing on impact?
Well, look, I think BSI has always been very focused on the development of the standards, the production of the standards, and the distribution of the standards we have. But when I've talked to committee members and chairs, one of the key bits of feedback we've heard is perhaps we haven't been focused enough on making sure that we maximise the impact of the standards that we create. Oh, sure, sorry. Is that better? Fabulous. Let me just repeat my point there, sorry, which was to say we have always thought about the production, distribution and development of standards, but perhaps we haven't thought enough about the maximising the impact of the standards that the committees create.
So when we talk about impact, often the first thing we think about is the bottom line of organisations that use them, so those financial impacts. Is that the only impact you're talking about?
No, just to be clear, we're thinking about a whole range of impacts, and it varies by the standard, but those can include areas like productivity, innovation, social impacts, technology, environmental impacts. And often we're creating some capital, right, in the world that we're leaving for society. So that could be a human capital, it could be manufacturing capital, could be societal innovation, environmental nature, etc. If you look at some of the great standards, like last year we developed an amazing new world-first standard on supply chain, making sure that slavery is not in organisational supply chains, which we developed as a British standard, but we're now hoping to internationalise through the ISO system. That standard, we've had, the impact of that is actually making sure that people are really using it. And there's a huge potential benefit there because there's estimated to be about 130 million people in slavery globally. I think about 130,000 possibly in the UK who are enslaved in some way. So actually by really working around our engagement with the various stakeholders around that standard, I'm pleased to say that some of the world's biggest retailers and supply chain owners have actually engaged with that standard to see whether they can improve things to hopefully reduce that awful statistic.
Good point, and we'll talk more about ethical supply chains, and that might well come up this afternoon as well, Neil. So we have lots of standards makers in the room. What difference will they see with this focus on impact?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think first of all, there'll be a more explicit conversation about impact. At a minimum, we'll be having an annual discussion with the committee to say what is the desired impact that the committee wants to achieve and how do they feel that that is progressing, and is there anything more BSI can do to help the committee in achieving that. I think that will then lead on to the support that we can offer in terms of providing more tailored support or providing more resources or thinking about different ways to engage in that impact discussion. It could be that for some committees, actually the impact is already there, right? It's already used by the industry. The conversation can be quite quick. But we know that for a lot of committees, actually, especially in the areas where we're creating cutting-edge standards, that actually there's an opportunity to do a lot more.
So what will we see different in the future then, at this event in the future, and as for BSI as an organisation for our standards? How do you see the impact of the impact work?
I think it will allow us to tell even richer stories and share best practice amongst committees around what's really working and how BSI can best support in achieving that. But fundamentally, I think we're all trying to do the same thing, which is make a positive difference to society. And we already do an extraordinary job of that through the 13,000 members we have in the UK, the hundreds of thousands that we link into globally. But how do we make that even more effective?
Fantastic. Neil Musk, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask our panellists to come and join me. We're going to have a panellist made up of 5 organisations who have been in a different way involved in this impact discussion. So welcome to the stage, and we'll give you a chance to introduce yourself in a second.
Mix it up.
Choose where you like. Sit where you like. There we go. Excellent. And you see the names on the slide there. So we're going to keep with this theme of impact and the way standards have impact. And Abby, I might come to you first. So Abby Lasebikan is the Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament. Abby, tell me a bit about your role, and then tell me about standards and what standard you've been involved in.
Hi, I'm Abby, and I work in the Welsh Parliament, commonly known as the Senedd, and I work in the diversity and inclusion team. And first of all, thanks for inviting me here today. Those of you who don't know, the Welsh Parliament is the democratically elected body, and it represents the interest of Wales and its people. We make laws, we approve taxes, and we scrutinise the Welsh Parliament. We're a relatively small body of 503 staff as of March this year. And we adopted the menstruation, menstrual health and menopause in the workplace policy, and adopted the standard to coincide by launching it on World Menopause Day in October last year. Although we previously had the guidance that we developed in 2020. So we adopted the standard to update and modernise that guidance.
Fantastic. And so that's now being used across the Parliament estate and with all the staff who work there?
Yes, it's it was launched across the organisation, and it's open to members to look at as well, because members of the Senedd obviously aren't commission staff, and the commission staff are the ones that provide the staff property and support the Senedd members.
Excellent. So we'll come back, Abby, in a second on the question of what that has done for the staff and the changes it had. But I want to turn to you next, Lee, if I might. Lee Turtle, Director of PAT IT. Tell us about your organisation and then tell us about your
Well, thank you very
standards
much
journey.
for inviting me along. It's a bit of an honour for me to do this, actually. As a small business, I started back in 2009, I started my little business. It's grown from there. Became a British Standards member back in 2020, I think it was. 2022, I became a Users Award winner, which was quite nice. But we predominantly do portable appliance testing, moving now into fire extinguisher servicing and emergency lighting. So now we're probably using in excess of 8 of the standards, some of them codes of practice, and some of them actual standards. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
That's your journey.
Yeah.
So what was it that drove you to use standards in the first place? Is it a customer drive? Is it a regulatory one? Or?
Yeah, no, well, we do obviously have those guidances. We've got so many guidance out there. We've got the IET code of practice that we work to. We've got the HSE that we can work to. I just felt, as my journey went, when I looked at the British standards for PAT testing, which was released in about 2020, I thought, actually, that's a great opportunity for us to look at those standards. It's based for the engineer as opposed to as a global guidance for a company and the engineer. So I started to adopt that, and since then, advertising that we use those standards. It's actually brought on a newer client base for us, bigger contracts, which is quite nice, rather than not dismissing hairdressers, smaller businesses, but we're now seeing councils, housing associations, much bigger companies going, actually, yeah, you know what you're talking about. You're obviously using standards, as opposed to, I've got a book from the HSE that's slightly outdated. Or so, yeah, those sort of standards are good for us in that respect.
Excellent. No disrespect to our HSE colleagues who might be with us today. But let's come back and we'll talk in a second about the way your business has been transformed and how standards has played that role to do it. But Emma, can I come to you next? So Emma Merritt is Customer Vulnerability and Communities Lead at Scottish and Southern Electricity Network. Tell us a bit about your role there, and then I'd be interested in your journey to standards as well.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me along today. So Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks is a distribution network operator, and and we have a fixed customer base in South Central England and the north of Scotland. We couldn't have picked two areas in the UK further apart. So that, of course, comes with its own challenges. As my role, I am responsible for ensuring that the service that we provide is supportive and inclusive for all of our customers, but especially for those that are medically dependent on electricity. We are regulated, but we felt that wasn't enough. Back in, I think it was 2015, 2016, I should know this as my previous role as the lead auditor, we started with the BS 18477, which is the inclusive service provision. When that moved to a kite mark, we thought we absolutely need to do this, and we were the first D&O distribution network operator in the UK to achieve that standard. We've now achieved that kite mark 2 years in a row, and it provides reassurance not just to our regulator and our stakeholders and to our shareholders as part of the SSE group, but also to all of our customers, that they know that everything we do is designed to be inclusive for all of our customers. And we have about, I think it's 3.9 million connected customers, which is businesses and domestic homes as well. Fantastic. And it's an issue, obviously it's an issue that's become much more in the spotlight over the last few years. Yeah, absolutely. It's we're regulated by a price control, but we are impacted quite severely by storms. This year's been the busiest that we've been. And through the kite mark that we have, we know that all of our plans are tried and tested, and that we're providing that inclusive service. A lot of our customers prefer to be digital. There are a lot of people who don't like going online. They like to speak to a person. So we make sure that no customer is left behind, especially when they're without power. Great, thanks, Emma. Alison, I want to come to you next. So Alison Heppenstall is the director and co-founder of Climate Action for Associations. So Ali, why don't you tell us a bit about your organisation, and I'm interested in your journey to standards as well.
Yeah, so I guess a different type of organisation, so Climate Action for Associations, or CAFA for short. We do what it says on the tin, basically. We support the membership sector to decarbonise, and how we do that is to roll out support to institutes, associations, trade bodies, societies, club, any organisation that has a membership as a network or a community, because we recognise the role and the importance of these groups to influence and accelerate change in terms of environmental change and climate action. So we provide information, guidance and support to help membership organisations themselves internally to reduce emissions, be more sustainable and have greater impact, and also to help them to help their members to do the same, and to advocate and put policies in place, because we believe that actually the influence that the membership sector has holistically and also individually as membership organisations, you can transform industries, sectors, systems dramatically. Established in 2020, 2021. And we have worked really closely with the team at BSI to adopt the ISO Net Zero guidelines and the BSI Net Zero pathway. I can talk in a second about in a bit more detail how we've aligned all of our programs of support and resources to that. But there is no ISO, there's no standard as yet, but we sit on the committee for Net Zero standard development, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying we've just hit a vote in that standard. We're going to see it coming out soon.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's going through the development process right now.
Yeah,
thanks,
really
Ali. We'll
exciting.
come back. I mean, it's a hugely important topic. I know we've got some people here who are involved in that work, but similarly on looking at the green transition, Ian, I'll come to you. So Ian's Chief Events Officer at HMG Major Events Unit. Ian, tell us about your work and your journey with standards.
Yeah, so I'm working the Major Events Unit, as you say, which is a small unit in the centre of government. And I've had the privilege, or a very busy few years since work on COP26, which I'll come to in a second, working in what we classify as major events, the Platinum Jubilee, Commonwealth Games, the Queen's funeral, coronation, those kind of major events are often politically facing. And we're a small unit. What we do, and the advantage of being in that unit and taking that experience forward, is we work across government with departmental event owners. There might not be that event expertise, but that's where we provide essentially a consultative level role from the very inception, looking at venues, looking at budgets, looking at security, the whole end to end, and then staying on that journey and helping them deliver. One of the the big hats I wear in that role is event sustainability, and that started on COP26 back in 2020, where we were faced with the push factor from the UN, who require the host country, which is the UK in 2021 in Glasgow, to deliver a wholly sustainable and a wholly carbon neutral event. So that was a challenge we had, and clearly that came forward, that ISO 2012-1, which I know people in the room probably wrote it. It was born out of the 2012 London Olympics, and we also used PAS 2060 as well for our carbon neutrality. So that gave us what's really important to all businesses, but particularly for public sector, that transparency and that robustness of approach, that we could demonstrate not only how that we had achieved a sustainable event, but how we'd done it. And it's because it's an international standard. It was widely recognised and accepted as the kind of the best way, and that was our shop window. Clearly, the eyes of the world were watching, so it was quite a challenging event to first start my journey with ISO 2012-1 on, because we had 45,000 experts on climate change coming to the event and kind of inspecting our work. But it's certainly valuable, and that structure and that framework that it gave us to engage with all our delivery partners from various sectors, our supply chain, absolutely key. I'll talk about more that in a second. That was so important. And take them on that journey to delivery, and realise that it's a pragmatic tool. It's not a stick to beat people with. It's something that can really drive positive innovation. And we've continued since, which I'll probably pick up as we discuss.
Excellent. Thank you, Ian, and congratulations on all your work and using the ISO standard. We're going to open it up for questions. So if you've got a question about impact of standards, maybe inspired by your own experience of using standards or writing standards, please put your hand up. We'll make sure we can get a microphone to you. But I might just go right along the panel and just ask specifically about why it was a standard, what the difference was between using a standard and using something else, because you've said there already, Lee, that there's HSE guidance out there, and I'm sure, Abby, you've got your internal guidance already. So I'm really keen to understand from each of you in 5 quite different areas what it was about the standard and the standard process that made a difference. So I don't know, Emma, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so for us, we work with a lot of different experts across the industry in consumer vulnerability, but we wanted something that would be recognised and something that, again, as I've mentioned before, would provide that reassurance. So we've been looking at our processes for a number of years. And then when we found out about the previous provision and then moving on to the kite mark, we thought this is something that customers recognise, people will recognise. It will give everyone that comfort knowing that we're doing the right thing, but also we've then got something that we can work towards. It's definitely a cornerstone now when it comes to us looking at our processes, looking at best practice, looking at how we can ensure that no customer's left behind. And we found through the process of getting the kite mark and the audit process, it also gives our employees, especially some of our field staff who don't normally get a chance to speak to someone outside the industry about the good work they do. And it's such an enormous sense of pride that they get when they're talking about helping a particular vulnerable customer or a change that they've come up across, because they can then relate it back to something that is documented, something that is recognised, and something that's there really to protect our customers.
That's really interesting, and there might be similar stories in the room. I'm really interested in that people journey. That the way it changes your own people internally. That's quite inspirational. What sort of feedback did you get? Do you monitor that?
Yes, so the first year we did it, and I was in position as lead auditor, and we were all absolutely terrified about how it was going to go. We didn't know what the outcome was going to be, how the audit would land. And as soon as we started speaking with, especially our frontline engineers, and these are men and women that are out in all weathers working 24/7, they're not really given a chance to speak to us about the service they provide to customers. They were then able to, as soon as they started talking, you couldn't get them to stop. I think all of our audit interviews ran over because it was just so much that was coming out from them. And it was just... And it's something that's continued, really, I think, in our 8-year journey that we've had as part of the standard and the kite mark. It was just reassuring, and it's also helped us look at things like our training. Our training is the biggest change that we've made because we get so much positive feedback during the interview process from the auditors. And points on how we can improve the training. So whilst it might be already at the standard, just how we can move things forward. And it's always quite reassuring to know that, especially this year, we've never normally had a director get interviewed, and I got a phone call from my director, our director of customer service, asking when his interview was, and I said, we haven't got you programmed in. He said, find time. I want to be part of this, which was fantastic. To get Andy in front of an auditor was just unheard of until now.
Excellent. Well, I mean, BSI has to get audited as well. Our knowledge and that happened yesterday, and there wasn't quite as much enthusiasm, but we still had to go through it. Abby, I'm interested. Obviously, you must have had procedures and HR processes in place. So, what was it about this standard that really attracted you?
Well, when you think I work in diversity inclusion, and we basically take an interest for the whole employee cycle, and by that I mean from recruiting to exiting the organisation. And when you realise that we're working in an era where women make up almost half the workplace nowadays, that there's 16.06 women of 16 and above in the UK that are in employment, when you realise that 1 in 10 women have left the workplace because of symptoms, and then a further 1 in 6 had contemplated leaving because they haven't got the right support when they've been experiencing the menopause. You realise that in terms of retention, there's a real big financial implication here. The Fawcett Society estimated that the UK workplace loses £10 billion to women leaving the workforce. So it's not something that you can not afford to address and consider. So when this standard came out, it was great, because we also want to attract people, and in the current climate, new people are considering who they go to work for. They're looking at their diversity and inclusion policy. They're looking at sustainability. They are really they want a workplace that sends the right message in regards to well-being. And the BSI couldn't fault it. It's credible, it's well known. And as Emma touched on, you mentioned BSI and senior levels and leadership, they listen. So it's comprehensive. I mean, it was up to date, it was informative. I mean, if we'd had to do the same calibre of research, we just wouldn't have taken us ages, because it consulted unions, consulted LGBT Foundation. So it would have taken us ages to get that kind of up-to-date information on that scale, and it enabled us, therefore, to get this menopause up to date in a good time. And then when you think that it's, for me personally, the approach, when you think that menopause experiences is affected by race, disability, there are many factors that impact on it. So the intersectional approach and that the standard had was crucial to me, and it was practical tools that it offered that enabled us to follow, to make sure that it was a good process and policy that people could rely on, and it aligned with our values. So and culture that we wanted was one that everyone was enabled to be their best and to do their job. So if we consider menopause, we're enabling people to be the best to do their job. So when you take all that into consideration, there's no way you couldn't consider and take menopause seriously. So.
Well said. Thanks. Lee, so in your area, as you mentioned, you've got a lot of documents out there already to use. They're not short of advice. What was it about the standards that...
So apart from Pat IT, I also am on the founding committee members for the Pat Testing Trade Association as well. I also work for a manufacturer of the test equipment, and teach their customers on how to use the equipment and how to pack test predominantly. So for me to use the standards, I can give a professional answer rather than, hang on a minute, should YouTube that? Or my guys going, let me just look on YouTube, Facebook it, they've all been there. So I can say, actually, according to the standards, this is what you want to be looking at. So it's good for us. Why? It's a bit like my kids, really. So, Daddy, why are you drinking that glass of milk? Well, I'm thirsty. I'm going to drink the glass of milk. Why? Okay, because it's full of calcium. It's good for your bones. Why? Okay. So the cows would explode in the field if they didn't get milked. So there'll be such a massive economic downturn for farmers. What's left in the fields? Crickets and cockroaches. And have you tried milking a cricket or a cockroach? No. So for the standards, the writers out there, we're the why, you're the because. So we want to ask that question, why? Why is a plug failing? Why does it look like a failure? Well, actually, it doesn't meet the standards. Why doesn't it meet the standards? I can say, under BS 1362, or 63, there's a creepage distance on that plug. Why? Well, you could get electric shock. So I've got that information through BSI to go, why? Because. And that's why we use it.
Yeah, fantastic. Well,
sorry, I know we went off on a tangent. Exploding cows there for a minute. But
that's the first reference to exploding cows we've had at one of these events. But we'll come back to that. You made the point. But I'm going to come to Ali and Ian in a minute. Are there any questions? We can get the or any observations already? We can get the microphones primed and ready to go. Yes, we have one here. So just while you're getting the microphone, let me just continue along the line. And Ali, I might ask you the same thing about why the standard. What was it about this standard? Is there nothing else? Is there no other? Because it seems that the net zero landscape is full of lots of different information.
Well, there's no standard. That is the thing at the moment. So what the ISO net zero guidelines did, so we adopted them as an organisation in our own right. But then we've also created a framework of best practice and support that we roll out to membership organisations, and then they can use that. So for us, it's around credibility. It's about structure. It's about having the alignment, BSI and ISO. I think the most important thing is that our team of sustainability experts. So I think we ourselves adopted. It's great. We're leading by example, and what we want is trade associations and membership bodies to do the same. We have the program of support, and we've sort of mirrored and based our support off the back of the ISO net zero guidelines and the pathway and the best practice. My sustainability team are obviously also following, when they go through their process, greenhouse gas protocols. They produce SCCR compliant reports. We're very aware of the Science-Based Target Initiative and the need to set interim science-based targets, etc. But what the ISO net zero guidelines do is they go way beyond that. They talk about leadership. They talk about policy. They talk about change making, nature, biodiversity, the impact. And so it goes way beyond more of a clunky scientific approach, and it looks much more a holistic change that's required by organisations. Excuse me. And for us, that's really important because of the nature of who we're dealing with. We're dealing with membership organisations that are quite complex in their own right in terms of structure, very different to a typical organisation, and the role that they play in relation to accelerating climate action and sustainability. So for us, it's been really important because we can say, yes, we're following greenhouse gas protocols, we're in line with all these other models and businesses, and frameworks, but fundamentally ISO and moving more towards the standard and the net zero guidelines and pathway, it enables us to go on that journey, which is more than just here's a measurement, here's an emission, here's an action plan. It actually pulls it all together into something that is actually really meaningful. And it creates the beginning of a conversation as well.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Thanks, Sally. Ian, obviously 2012-1, as you said, it's been around since the London Olympics.
Yeah.
But what is different? What provides that differentiator for you?
Just a little scared of like Lee would be the best auditor ever, or the worst one. I'm wise. For us, I mean, we didn't have our UK government didn't have a policy on events in terms of sustainability per se. We had departmental policies, but they didn't really address sustainable event delivery. So it was really important at the outset to look at that, and ISO 2012-1 gave us that. And I think what I said earlier was it kind of took you on that journey, because we had talking about COP26. It was a unique event, the largest event of its type ever hosted in the UK, and also done during COVID-19. So there's a lot of challenges there to overcome, and obviously in the scale of it, it brought a lot of different supply chains, a lot of different delivery partners, and obviously we had to control that, but do it in a way that, like I thought the people have said, it would take us on a journey and not just have a rigid checklist of, we've done that. Look, we've done it. We delivered sustainably. So the first thing that the standard requires you to do is set out essentially the policy you call value and purpose, and then the magic part for me is our guide, because they continue, our guiding principles of sustainability, which cover the social, the environmental, and the economic aspects of sustainability, and break down into areas of improved behaviours, circular economy. So we're talking about the supply chain, accessibility, inclusivity, and legacy. I mean, the breadth again was for me gave essentially, it was really cool, as you said, Ali, because it's so broad and it tackles so many issues, but it's got a healthy dose of pragmatism. So when we engage with those 7 principles actively with our partners, initially there's that sense of concern. It's, oh gosh, once you mention the word audit, which obviously I do use liberally with our directors because it scares them to death and we have to get there. But talking to partners, it's like the art of the possible. If you're a small business, well, what are your transport arrangements for the goods you bring into the event? What's your supply chain? Could you consider in terms of no single-use plastics, let's take that out of there. Is an opportunity for that, and those kind of challenges turned into opportunities, and was it kind of had an energy, and having the different scales of partners together. So the SEC venue looked at the catering offer in November in Glasgow, and still did seasonal and local, believe it or not, absolutely amazing, and did some things which continue to this day. But then that inspired other partners there to look at those simple things in terms of reusable cups. We took 300,000 cups out of the bin, so to speak. They said, no, we're going to go for this because, again, think about a sustainable event. It's a real driver. I mean, for us, we had that push factor from the UN, but the driver is it's a better event. It costs less because we're using less. So by taking that out for the SEC, and they continue to use it to today, they have cups which I think they can be washed, 600 or 700 times. So that has actually saved them a massive amount, and obviously an absolute win for us in terms of reducing the waste, because we had a commitment for zero waste as well. So it took us on that journey, and those our masthead, so to speak, those 7 principles are really powerful engagement tools which continue, and they bled into the procurement I mentioned, and that sets out our stall initially when we're procuring the kind of key suppliers, production, transport, security. So from the outset, there's that engagement through procurement, which is very formal, but then there's already that buy-in. So when we kind of come to that point of developing the delivery plan, then it's a matter of how far we can go. And honestly, not just on COP, because that was obviously an environmental kind of focused event, but it's a matter of how far we can go, because the benefit is there towards the end. And I think that's sometimes not mistake, but sometimes people misinterpret that audit word. We're going for certification. Is this, you're just going to beat us with this all the way through? It's like, no, we're just going to look for the best opportunities. It's about continuous improvement. So what we don't do this time, we can learn from that and apply to the next event. And that's basically the journey we continue to take now.
Excellent.
Can I chip in on that?
Yeah, please, Ali.
So just a point around membership organisations, trade bodies, run hundreds, thousands. Some of them run like thousands of events,
Yeah.
depending on how big or small they are. So part of our best practice framework, working with membership organisations, is to look at their events as one of their biggest emission areas as well. So we're looping in the ISO 2112, 24 revamp
Indeed.
at the moment into that and saying, okay, so what does that look like? It's not actually feasible for every membership organisation to apply ISO,
Correct.
the event sustainability standard, to all of their events, but actually is there one or two that they can really focus in on? And so linking it in and pulling other standards in as and when, or at least signposting them.
That's a perfect way to put it, because some of our events have been so short notice to not be able to go for ISO,
Yeah.
perhaps more smaller events, but they've taken those 7 principles and
Yeah.
applied them, and actually we've still kind of captured the outputs, quantitative and qualitative. So it's still kind of working by proxy. So
Exactly.
like you say, it's quite right. It respects that scale. So it's not the only kind of option.
Yeah.
Can
Abby,
I-
did you want to come in on that? And then we're going to go to questions.
Yeah, just because I'm noticing a common theme with all these standards is that not only does it provide the why and the practical, like for the menopause, it provided the legal requirement, but it's the moral stuff as well. But in terms of the practical tools, it's got annexes on how to have conversations. It's got how to look at your risk assessment. It's not something that you take like the whole thing. You can take specific bits that interest you in terms of recruitment, health and safety, as a line manager, how to have a conversation with someone and how to broach it. So it's that practicality for me that about the standards, and I think this is coming through in all of them. It's invaluable. Yeah.
Well, we might come back. You've all been extremely positive, so we might come back and ask you in a minute about what we could do better. I'm sure there's areas that we could improve on. But we're going to take one question here. Do we have another question anywhere else as well? We have another question at the front down here. So you might want to introduce yourself.
Thank you very
first.
much. My name is Maggie Ellis. I think that one thing you have not really covered is the importance of this event. Now, I don't want to get into politics. I attend many meetings in Westminster and in Holyrood because I have 2 bases, one 70 miles from the top of Scotland and one half a minute from here. But I represented BSI in 2004 when we were in Europe, and I chaired a committee about transport for people with less abilities. That was a vital collaboration. And at that time, we had the best transport system in Europe. We don't have any more. But I think that we have to get the basis of what being British means. You see, if I go to talk to people in Holyrood, they get very angry if I mention the word British. So start from there. And how are we really representing ourselves outside the islands? And I think we have to be careful because we're competing with each other so much. We're not actually collaborating. Now, I help coordinate a European technology group, which is not European, it's Japan and USA and wherever. But in that, we are collaborating. And I worry. I don't know who the hell you are. And we've got these crazy name badges that we can't read. They should be here. But the point being, we have standards. Sadly, at the moment, our health service alone spends more money compensating for bad services than they do for services. So British standards must make sure that the law is kept. No good saying you can go to Europe and to the final court. You can. Costs money. We shouldn't be doing that. BSI should be doing it.
Well, thank you for that call to action. I mean, there's work to be done for sure. But I think your point about Britain in the world is really interesting. lens by which we could look through some of these issues, because certainly some of those standards we talked about, actually the international ones started in Britain. I mean, is there a sense when you use it that it kind of means more because it did actually, I mean, I'm thinking particularly about 2012 one, but the net zero guidelines for sure as well, and indeed inclusive services. And the menopause is only a British standard, so it will be international in the future, hopefully. Is there a sense that it kind of is more relevant here? And how do you see that if those standards become international? I mean, in the case of the menopause standard, does it make a difference to you if we can influence the international standard?
I think the menopause is a global issue. I think no matter where you are in the world, it's an issue. It's a lot of people are. It's a topic that resonates with a lot of people. Resonates with a lot of people. Yeah. So I think internationally there is definitely a place for it, and if it follows the British standards, I think it gets people thinking and talking the right way. And I think every employer, no matter where you are globally, if you can make your workers happier, more productive, it's a win-win. And we're not all based in one place anymore. Sure. So even if we are in Britain, we're working with international, global organisations. And in terms of procurement, we want the people we contract out to adopt those same principles and values we have. So.
Thank you. And Ian, for 2012 one, which started out as a British standard,
Yep.
I mean, did you even know that? Was that part of your thinking at all?
I did do my history lesson with Crowbury colleagues who were here in the room somewhere. So when I started, the kind of legacy of it was quite important. But I suppose we're fortunate with the commodity that the kind of major events that I'm involved with, COP is a great example of that, are internationally facing events. We're hosted in the UK, but we're welcoming guests literally from every country in the world. And that's a common theme. We've got the EU Political Summit coming up in July, which welcomes 54 heads of state and lead organisations from across Europe. So it's the ability to have that international standard applied to the event in terms of its sustainability has been really powerful, because it's absolute credibility of the value of that standard born here in the UK, as you say, and that's something then that can be has been adopted, since conversations with COP27, COP28, and currently COP29 are learning from what we've done here in the UK, using the international standard and apply it themselves. Similarly with the sports events I've worked on, Commonwealth Games, there's been that ripple effect. So it's a really powerful commodity, and that pride factor that we've got an international standard born here in the UK. That we're able. It's that transferability, and people have learned from what we've done and applied it here, and would expect to see it in that sense. If people are coming to say and they recognise it's an internationally recognised standard. So when people are coming to our events, they are happy to see that, and that's part of the delegate experience, as we would call it. That we do put in the joining instructions that leave the extra bags, bottles,
absolutely,
as many kind of things like that at home. So it's very inclusive.
Hopefully we follow the principles here. We have a question in the second row. Do you have you do? Also, the Paris Olympics, of course, will be certified this year for I think the first Olympics. Yes.
Hi, thank you. I'm Helen Gray, BSI's Consumer Policy Manager, and our work in our team is to facilitate and enable consumer protection stakeholders to participate in standards, which I think is spread across the variety of subjects we're speaking about today. But specifically for consumer vulnerability, the consumer stakeholder was a real driving force in the development of that standard. I'd like to just ask about how that multi-stakeholder, all voices heard approach supports the confidence that you and your organisations have in implementing those standards and the positive impact that they'll have. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Because that's another differentiator, I guess. It's who's actually writing it. Emma, do you want to go?
So when we first decided to go for the predecessor to the kite mark, we spoke to our stakeholders first of all. We have a stakeholder advisory panel that we put the idea to. We also took it to our wider stakeholder groups to say to them that we know we're trying for customers. There's more that we should be doing. We gave them a couple of different options, and it goes to show how popular the BSI standard was, because I can't even remember what the other ones were that we put forward. And they all said the same thing: it's recognisable. We know what this means. So we went through it for that format, and we were quite lucky in that when it moved from the standard to the kite mark, my former colleague Julie was on the panel that helped write that standard as well. So we were all able to feed in a little bit, and we knew what was going on. So it gave us a little bit more confidence when it came to going for the kite mark. But we didn't just go to our stakeholders. We have customer working groups with customers that are in vulnerable situations and customers that don't consider themselves vulnerable. And we asked them, again, is this the right standard? How should we be doing this? But more importantly, how does this make you feel as a customer? For the majority of our services, customers can't speak with their feet. They can't move to another provider unless they physically move house to a different location. So we needed to make sure that the measure that we put in provided, and I keep coming back to this reassurance, but that's really what it's done for our organisation and for our customers. And we even took it to the SSE group as well, because we do, as part of our work, we do contract out to them and say, well, this is a domestic customer process. How do you feel from a business-to-business point of view? And because a lot of our processes do overlap, it again provided that reassurance, but it was the stakeholder feedback, the customer feedback before we decided to go for it that was really that driving force, because, again, everyone knew British Standard, everyone knew who BSI was. So we were just, as soon as we found that, I think the next day we registered, we signed up, and it's just been quite a good journey since.
And Lee, for your world, in the electrical world, obviously there's charities like Electrical Safety First that are involved in the development, at least from the UK side. How important is that in how you accept those standards?
Well, it's incredibly important for our customers to see that we are working to a standard. Most of them don't actually understand, and having that standard and being able to explain fully and give confidence in what you're saying and having those standards to fall back on, it's incredibly important for us. Mm-hmm. In that respect, again, we can always go back on past guidances that are slightly outdated in some areas, but it's just incredibly important that I've got that information upwards of, I don't know, what is it, 20-odd thousand British standards at the moment. Not that we're going to use them all, but we've got that information all in our hand, and we can soon reference that. And it just gives our customers that confidence.
Any more questions in the room? We have a question here, and one at the back there, so maybe we can get 2 microphones if possible. Is that possible? Race, whoever gets the mic first and speak first. There we go. Yes.
Are we on? Can you hear me? Good.
You're on.
Nick Hirons. I'm also with Consumer and Public Interest Network. But today I'm wearing my Citizens Advice hat, and my question is addressed to Emma. It's very interesting that you've been encouraged to use this particular standard. I don't know the standard that well myself. I'll probably be chastised for that later. But one of the problems that I have, not only with, we don't deal with SSE particularly, but is actually getting hold of providers on the telephone. We have vulnerable customers coming in to see us, as is well known, but even ourselves, we are hanging on the phones for hours where we could be spending more valuable time. Have you ever considered having a direct line to organisations such as ourselves where you can actually pick the phone up? We have 1 or 2 organisations who do that, but very few. And just to give you an example, there was one government organisation I tried to contact yesterday. I was on the phone for over an hour and I never got anywhere.
No, thank you. That is, I'll be honest, we partner with Citizens Advice Scotland, and that's absolutely the feedback that we get from their advisors regularly. So just to kind of clarify who SSEN are, we're not an energy supplier. We don't bill customers for their electricity. We instead provide we look after the infrastructure, so the substations, the cables, the general network. There is an ongoing piece of work with Ofgem at the moment, so I can't go into too much detail. But I will say I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I used to work in the retail business myself, and when I did, we had a direct line that would go from various organisations or customer interest bodies that would come straight through to our call centre, to a specialist team. we're hearing more and more that people can't speak to people about their bills, and that's from customers. So they come through to our call centre, which is there to deal with emergency situations. We try and provide as much advice and support as we can, but because of our business separation, we can only provide so much, and that's become a lot more difficult since we sold off the retail side of our business. In terms of what you're saying about having that direct number, we're working with the Energy Networks Association, who is our energy body. This is a conversation that's been going on for at least 8 years. And we met yesterday, and we're trying to push the energy suppliers to have a 24/7 service. There's no guarantee that that would happen, but also a method for people like yourselves at Citizens Advice to be able to get through. I wish I could tell you that I could make all the energy suppliers put in a specialised number, and believe me, I could if I would. But we're not able to influence that as much as we would like to. But I absolutely recognise what you're saying, because there's nothing worse than at 3 o'clock in the morning you're getting a single parent calling through. They've got a problem with their electricity meter. They can't top up their bill. And we're not able to help them because we don't own that particular meter, or we're not an energy supplier. But it is, I'm sorry I couldn't give you a more reassuring answer, but it's absolutely something that needs to happen. And that's why we make sure with this standard that we're trying to do as much as we can, even for those customers that we're not able to provide the full support for. We're at least trying to provide them the right guidance and the advice. All of that has come from the standard.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Emma.
your question.
We have a question in the middle, please.
Thank you. My name is Darren Dupre. I work for Unison, the trade union. I'm very lucky to be on a stellar panel who helped write the Menopause and Menstrual Health Support at Work standard. Abby, thank you very much, diolch yn fawr, for all the work that you've done on this. And I think, if not the first organisation within the UK to adopt the standard. So two very, very, very quick questions. The first one, encouraging to both British standards but also other organisations who would like to adopt the standard. No disrespect to bean counters, I'm sure there's a few here. How important is it for you, or was it for you, that this standard was free to download, and many of the ideas behind it were free to implement? And number two, do you have a message to organisations which are run by men about how important it is for men to be allies in women's health around menstrual health and menopause support at work?
Great questions. In fact, you must have read my mind, because that was one thing I forgot to mention about why we chose the standard. Is it's free. I can't basically stress enough how crucial that was. Not, we're a public body, we have to account for every bit of spending, but in terms of accessibility, financially, that isn't an impact in the decision making whether to adopt that standard. It's free. Why wouldn't you? And it's the thing in the standard. The simple changes can make a great difference, and they don't have to cost a lot. So, for a start, free. Yes, great, because normally you have to pay for these standards, so great. In terms of how important it is for men, I would actually say that it affects 100% of the workforce, because men are line managers, husbands, fathers, sons, brothers. So they need to actually understand the importance of the menopause and some of the issues. So in terms of line managers, there's how can you broach the conversation? So that was a great impact for that. I mean, I wrote a quote here, one of the quotes I'd like to actually read out was from one of our male line managers, and he basically says, there is a clear need for more men to have an increased understanding that they can apply both inside and outside the workplace. And I couldn't say it better myself for that.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers your question.
Just jumping off the back of the cost of standards. I'm probably one of a few small businesses out there that do use the standards, BSI member. I feel that a lot of the smaller companies, the sole traders, aren't necessarily making use of those standards. They're using guys like me to ask the question, why? but they are challenged with the cost of some of these standards. And I would like to see particular standards become a code of practice. But still, for the sole trader, the guy that's starting out, £200 or £300 can be a little bit of money for them to sort of initiate. But it would be a big, good question to sort of move on. How can we make these standards more accessible for small businesses rather than, I've got such an outlay?
Yeah, I mean, I have to hold my hand out and shake it for BSI that they've actually recognised it, because initially it was only free for 1 year. They extended it to 3 years. Who knows where it's going? So I think that says how important that it's being free and how much credit is put on that topic.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, let's talk more about that. I'm sure we've got, there are some solutions out there right now for small business, micro enterprises through the FSB, but we can talk more about what they look like. I'm keen to talk about the standards themselves, and frankly, we've had some success stories. It'd be nice to talk about some of the challenges that you faced. The doors are closed, so we can have a private conversation about what could we have done better. What was it? Because we've recently been using 2012-1, and one of my colleagues, when first started to draw up our policy, said, "God, it's really hard. It's really difficult." And we often hear from people that it's either the standard is reassuringly difficult, which gives them the differentiator, but also we hear it's overly complex. So thinking through, maybe through that complexity lens, or anything else that you found that was a real challenge with you picking up the standard and using it, who'd like to get their boot in first?
I don't mind jumping in first.
Go on, Emma.
So I think the biggest challenge that we had when we first started with the original standard is that we found, because we're not a natural monopoly, we don't bill customers, there were certain aspects that we felt didn't apply to us. So it was working with the British Standard Auditor to work out exactly what parts of the standard didn't apply to us, and could we have an exemption in that area. And I think that was quite a long, drawn-out process initially, because there hadn't been any exemptions that had been made to that particular standard at that point. So we had a lot of conversations. There was a lot of evidence providing to show why, reviewing of our licence obligations, just to explain why we don't bill. And it was quite challenging. And there was a moment when we thought, is this worth it? I'm glad to say that we persevered through. But after that, it was fairly smooth sailing. And then when it came to the kite mark, again, we knew where there could be an exemption, how we could work through that. But we did go into, I think, with rose-tinted glasses a little bit at first, because we were so sure we'd sailed through the last few years, we were going to sail through it again. And I think it was because we'd had someone working with us who had been involved in creating the kite mark, that we thought this first year is going to be fantastic. And we tripped on the smallest issue, which was around sharing of best practice. So our 2 licence areas are split into 7 regions. We thought they were great at speaking to each other, and we found that people were going off doing separate things. So the challenge that we had when it moved to the kite mark was our own naivety, I think, because of what we've done before. But as I say, going back to that initial conversation, luckily British Standard were very accommodating, very understanding, but it was just, I think, a long, drawn-out process from both sides, which could have gone a bit smoother, but we definitely learnt from that going forward.
Yeah. Any more feedback? Abby, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'd say 2 points in that. For me, it more the idea of it being too clunky, because it wasn't a small document, but my approach to things like that is always to not read from front to cover. You basically dive into the bits that you want. But the BSI, wonderfully, they did a little book. So if you haven't got time to go through the actual standard, there's a little book. And there is, in addition, a guidance. So in terms of how much time you've got, a lot of information has been condensed down. So that would be my response to sort of that being too clunky. My second challenge is, it's all very well having a standard, and as we did a gap analysis. So we adopted as a standard to influence and develop that guidance internally. So we did a gap analysis and made it specific for our organisation as well. So that, I think, is the key, is you're using it to see what you do well and what you need to improve on.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Anyone else want to come in? Ali?
Yeah, I mean, it's net zero, I mean, it's so complex and it's big as well. And it's not we'll achieve that standard, tick, we're net zero now. I mean, that's just not, it just doesn't happen because organisations are moving, they're growing, they're changing, they're diversifying everywhere. So it's an ongoing thing. And I guess with the team at BSI, it took us about 4 months to work with them to look at, okay, what are we doing internally as an organisation, leading by example, and then all of our resources, all of our programs of support and our service that we offer membership organisation, we kept, like you said, we kept dipping in and out. Well, how does that, we're not doing very well, okay, we need to adjust that. For us, the complexity was around the language that we use, the role, the leadership, making sure that everything that the guidelines cover in some way, shape or form, we are reflecting that and we're living that. And it's still ongoing. So it's not something, I don't think, and I also think when it comes to an ISO or a British standard in net zero, that's not going to be linear either.
Yeah,
it can't be. So I do think it's going to be complex. Yeah. But the good thing is that it exists and it's a framework there and it's really solid and it's credible. Yeah. And it's actually really quite simple to read. It's not full of lots of science where you go, I don't understand. What? It genuinely is for an organisation, no matter what size, what industry, etc., to be able to pick up and go, okay, I think I can practically use this.
So for these kind of transversal ones, Lee, they're probably a bit more accessible, let's say. In terms of
really.
So on
yours
a
are a bit
personal
more
note
complex.
for me, I'm dyslexic. Now downloading standards for me, and then I have to read a line at least 3 times before it goes in here. Yep. So I'm partly because of that, and I get visual stress as well. So black print on a white background, words start to move around. So it takes me quite a while to get through one document, so you can imagine. So colourful or a background colour option on those standards would be great. Downloading it as a PDF would be excellent for me. I know I can put a pair of glasses on. I don't get on with glasses, but having that option, just to be able to change the background colour, that would be...
Yeah, I'm a fellow dyslexic person, great. And another bit of advice on that standard with my diversity and inclusion hat on is you can get things done in easy read as well. So maybe consider alternative easy read versions different as well, formats. Which makes it even more accessible to a wider audience, Braille, that sort of thing. I mean, the other challenge I just want to pop in is it's no good having this standard or adopting it and developing guidance or policy if it's going to sit on the shelf. I mean, you did a study called the Lifting the Glass Ceiling, and in it there was 26% of businesses have implemented the policy. Of those 26%, 75% said it had a positive effect. However, in a further study, there's Lifting the Glass Ceiling 2 by BSS. Only 4% of women said they were aware of a formal policy in the organisation. Right. So don't let it sit there.
It's got to be used, And for 2012 one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, quite rightly, a very complex set of system documents sat behind the standard, and I think that was quite challenging at first. I have got a background much longer in environment and climate change and carbon management, but the first time coming to the standard, it was quite a deep breath to look at the kind of the burden. There's a word of evidence we had to provide. The legal register was a lot of fun because it was a Westminster-owned event, but it was being delivered in Scotland, so we had to cover devolved administrations. But we did take support on that, and we worked with Becky and Crowbury to kind of basically unpick that. And we did that once. That was a lot of work, and we've been able to carry that forward. And yes, that's the engine room to it. That's obviously you got to provide that evidence. But I think that complexity was quite a deep breath and a lot of kind of evidence to provide to go. But then that translated through because there's the risk and issues register. That's a very familiar tool. Then that docks well in with the main project register. So as we kind of put it all together, and those system documents still live and they've evolved to this day. They are being embedded into organisational practice, which, because we are going for FCDO, Foreign Office Organisational Certification this year, which will live for 3 years, which again will reduce the burden further because we've embedded those now.
Thank you. Very short question, I'm afraid, so it's going to have to be a teeny tiny question, and we're going to see if we can quickly get an answer to you.
My name is Tom Chaldicott. I'm a machinery safety and compliance consultant, thinking about kind of small enterprise. This is more a question for BSI. There was a European Court of Justice case, so I'm just going to read out the title. It'd be great to understand kind of what your thoughts are on what kind of the commercial aspects of this are. So the European harmonised technical standards on the safety of toys should be accessible to EU citizens. So kind of great, they might be cheaper, but what does it do to kind of the model of standards, how they're kind of governed, and BSI's commercial model as well?
That's a great question. As you can imagine, we're spending quite a lot of time thinking about that judgment right now. It does have implications for how we operate in terms of the national standards body. It does only affect a small part of our standards collection, but it is something that we want to be fully compliant with. I can see you've got a white lanyard. That tells me you're going to be at the AGM, and I'm pretty sure it's going to come up at the AGM. So I'm not parking that one, but it will come up, and we can talk as well offline and indeed raise it later on. But I'm afraid we are out of time. And so I hope you'll join me in thanking our esteemed panel. So Emma, Abby, Lee, Ali, and Ian. Thank you, everybody. Just stay where you are for a second. So I just need to give you some very important joining instructions, because we're going to take a break now. When we come back in this room, it will be the BSI annual general meeting. So I'll be handing over to the chair of the BSI board, John Hurst. So voting members, and if you've got a white lanyard, you're a voting member, please collect your voting cards on the way back into the room after the break. But everyone, please be advised that in accordance with AGM rules, at 12 o'clock, the doors will be locked. So if you're not in, you're going to miss it. So if for any reason you're late coming back, there is another room on the right where broadcast of the meeting will happen, but for various complicated reasons, we have to lock the doors at 12, so please be back if you want to join for that. So it's the Thames room, which is right and right again out of this room, if you want to watch it on the stream. Thanks very much. There's teas and coffees upstairs, and visit the Knowledge Marketplace back in here at 12 sharp for the AGM. Thank you. Thanks.